Do you love me? I asked, looking up from my phone. I was lying in bed, and I turned my head toward Chloe, who was sitting in a chair reading. She looked up, a little lost, her big, innocent eyes blinking at me. She thought for a moment, then asked, "What about you? Do you love me?" I was silent for a long time. Chloe looked back down at her book. "It's enough that we both love the baby," she said, her hand resting on her 6-month belly. "I know we can do that. Right, Leo?" A long silence filled the bedroom. My wife, Chloe Davis, has a Ph.D. in engineering, specializing in welding. She was the only woman in her entire department, the undisputed queen of the program. She wasn't stunning, but she was cute, with large eyes and a touch of baby fat on her cheeks. And yet this adorable, brilliant woman had never even been on a real date before me. I have no idea if the guys in her program were all just bookworms or if she was just that hard to approach. We both went to the same university, but I was 2 years ahead of her and we'd never crossed paths. I started my own company right after undergrad. It's a small firm, just a handful of people, but we turn a decent profit each year. Chloe and I met on a setup. Her Ph.D. advisor is a partner in my company, and we work together a lot. He kept suggesting I meet his star student, and eventually I reluctantly agreed. We met for the first time at a restaurant off campus. Watching her bounce toward me, I have to admit I didn't feel a thing. She was almost 30, but seemed like a kid who hadn't quite grown up, and she looked younger than her age. The nice way to put it was pure. The blunt way was a kind of naivete that bordered on cluelessness. I'm 2 years older than her. As we chatted, I learned about her family. She was refreshingly honest, telling me she was from a small town in Ohio, that her parents didn't have pensions or much income. She had an older sister, also a Ph.D., who was a university professor and had just gotten married the year before. I nodded. She and her sister sounded like classic cases of small-town brainiacs who studied their way to the big city. To be honest, our backgrounds were a total mismatch. I was a Chicago native born and raised, and my parents were retired civil servants. A guy with my profile could easily find a younger, prettier local girl. After I told her about my situation, I saw a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. She probably realized it wasn't going anywhere, though neither of us said it. The rest of the dinner was noticeably more relaxed. With no expectations, there was no need to pretend. When we parted ways, I didn't have a bad impression of her. She was genuine. I could see us being friends. Her advisor passed my message along to her, and she said she'd had a good impression of me, too. So we actually started hanging out as friends. Occasionally, when I'd go to campus to discuss business with her advisor, I'd ask her to grab a bite, or we'd just walk around the quad. My parents were getting anxious. I was 32 and still single. Her parents were even more desperate. In a town like hers, a 30-year-old unmarried woman was prime material for gossip. And so, after a year of this, our parents met, we got our marriage license, and we had a wedding. After we made it official, I wanted to add her to the deed of the condo I'd bought before we met. It was my way of showing I was serious about the marriage. The truth is, I was also being a bit selfish. I figured the marriage wouldn't last, and if we divorced, I didn't want her to be left without a home in Chicago. I didn't want to screw her over. She was a good person, even if I didn't love her. But Chloe refused. She said that was all just material stuff she didn't care about. When she wouldn't budge, I dropped it. My work was as hectic as ever after the wedding. When a company landed a big contract, I'd be swamped for weeks. Chloe's life, by comparison, was much calmer. After graduation, she'd started a job at a government research lab, and her days were pretty laid back. Every time I came home, dragging my exhausted body through the door, Chloe would have dinner ready, waiting for me at the table. I love that feeling. I finally had a home, a light left on just for me. It wasn't that I saw her as a maid. It was the fact that she wanted to be there, waiting for me. It was grounding. I'd had plenty of girlfriends, starting in high school, but I'd never once felt that kind of stability. As we lived together, I began to realize I had married a true eccentric. It's hard to describe her. She was unlike any woman I'd ever met. She was hilarious and very, very weird. I didn't know much about the pre-marriage Chloe, but I soon discovered she lived completely in her own world. It was a world I didn't understand and couldn't get into, and it didn't seem like she had any intention of opening the door for me. One Saturday afternoon, I went home to grab some files, and Chloe wasn't there. She had weekends off. Where could she be? The question crossed my mind, but I didn't dwell on it. I got what I needed and left. As I was driving past the pavilion in the local park, I heard a commotion and saw Chloe perched on a bench, playing chess with a group of old men. Her voice, loud and clear, caught my attention. I thought I was seeing things. I pulled over and walked closer. Sure enough, there she was, in the middle of a circle of retirees, her hand clamped down on one man's wrist, face flushed as she argued with him about taking back a move. The sight of it made me laugh in disbelief. I called her name. When she saw me, she stood up awkwardly, scratching her head in embarrassment. I felt a little awkward myself. Honestly, after years of running a business, I developed a pretty thick skin. Not much could embarrass me anymore. Seeing how flustered she was, I found it kind of funny. Go on. Keep playing, I said, trying to be casual. I just came back for something. To my surprise, she just nodded and sat right back down. I was speechless. Driving back to the office, I kept thinking about it, regretting that I called out to her. I felt like I had barged into her private world, uninvited. It wasn't right. I had made her uncomfortable, and that made me feel guilty. That evening, I made a point to get home early. Chloe was in the kitchen, busy with dinner. She looked surprised to see me, but didn't ask why I was back so soon. She just told me to have a seat, that one more dish was almost ready. After dinner, as she was about to clear the plates, I stopped her. I cleared the table and did the dishes, then led her to the couch. I'm sorry about today, I said. That was out of line. Chess is your hobby. I shouldn't have interrupted you. Chloe just waved her hand dismissively, as if it were nothing. From now on, whatever hobbies you have, just do them. I continued. You don't have to worry about me. I support you. She scratched her head, a little shyly, and asked tentatively, anything? Of course, I nodded, confirming. It's not like you have any bad habits. Why not? She jumped up and down with a grin, flashing me a peace sign. Still a kid. I asked her about other things, and she was an open book, answering whatever I asked. But if you didn't ask, she'd never bring it up on her own. That was Chloe. Time ticked by. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then a year had passed. I was still me, Chloe was still Chloe, and our life was still as placid as ever. No passionate romance, no heart-pounding moments. The only difference was that I knew her better, and the more I learned, the more I was convinced of my initial assessment. She was a bona fide weirdo, genuinely fun, but genuinely strange. After our talk where I told her to live as she pleased, she took me at my word. The very next day, she hired a construction crew. It was a Sunday, a rare day off for me. I was catching up on sleep when I was jolted awake by the sound of demolition. I stumbled out of the bedroom, yawning, to find Chloe directing a crew that was tearing apart our home gym. When she saw me, she came over sheepishly and linked her arm in mine. You never use this gym anyway, she said. I was thinking of turning it into a karaoke room. Is that okay? I gave her a weary look. You've already torn it all out, and now you're asking me if it's okay. Does that seem right to you? Seeing her scratch her head awkwardly, I let out a long sigh. Go ahead. It's already half demolished, and I always intended for this place to be yours anyway. Chloe immediately let go of my arm, cheering, and went back to directing the crew with renewed vigor. I left for a business trip on Monday, leaving her to her project. Out of sight, out of mind. When I got back that weekend, Chloe wasn't waiting for me at the dinner table. That was a first. I couldn't find her anywhere in the house. I was about to call her when I remembered her new karaoke room. I pushed the door open, and the wall of sound almost blew my eardrums out. Chloe was wearing a bandana, sunglasses, a studded jacket, and jeans. The most absurd part was a heavy chain belt around her hips that must have weighed 5 pounds. She was clutching a microphone, howling her way through the Rolling Stones. I can't get no satisfaction. I closed the door and stood there, watching her rock and roll performance. It wasn't until the song was over that she noticed me standing by the door. I applauded. Satisfaction, not bad. Chloe slid her sunglasses down her nose. Hey, not bad, kid. You know this song? You a fan of classic rock too? Her comment made me laugh. Classic rock fans. Who doesn't know one of the most famous songs of all time? My face hardened. Did you make dinner? I'm pretty sure I told you I was coming home today. Chloe quickly shed the studded jacket and unclipped the heavy belt. Oh, crap, she said, running out of the room. I got too into it. I totally forgot. I just shook my head, exasperated. That was Chloe. She loved rock music, playing chess with the old guys in the park, and making herself a pot of tea to sip in her rocking chair while she read. She read everything, all kinds of books. Lately, she'd gotten obsessed with the I Ching and was always saying cryptic things. She'd tell me to be careful on my way out the door or something similar. I'd laugh and poke her on the forehead. Chloe, you're a PhD at a national lab. Don't you know they'll revoke your security clearance if they find out you're into this mystical stuff? Whenever I said that, she'd put her hands behind her back, shake her head, and sigh dramatically. Ah, the youth are too young to appreciate words of wisdom. She was a terrible actor. I have to admit, she was right a couple of times, but mostly it was nonsense. On our first wedding anniversary, my mom asked me to bring Chloe over. By now, my parents considered her the apple of their eye. I had assumed a PhD in welding would be a typical, socially awkward engineer. But she was a natural with people. Not only was she popular at work, but everyone in my family, from the adults to the kids, adored her. My parents treated her like the daughter they never had. I once asked her how she managed to get along with everyone so well. She put on a wise look, stroking an imaginary beard. It's simple, sincerity, and it was true. She treated my parents like her own. No wonder they loved her. At dinner, my mom had Chloe sit next to her, serving her food and fussing over her. As I sat there eating, Chloe dropped a bombshell. She put down her chopsticks and said to my parents, "Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant." My mouth fell open. I was stunned. How did I not know this? My dad was so happy his eyes crinkled into slits, and my mom hugged Chloe and started crying with joy. From that moment on, they practically enshrined her. After dinner, as I was driving Chloe home, my mom gave me a list of instructions. You have to help her walk. Don't let anything happen to her. If there's any danger, you throw yourself in front of her, even if you get crippled. Give me a break. I guess I wasn't worth much. On the way back, I asked Chloe why she hadn't told me she was pregnant. She looked at me, a little hurt. You haven't been home in 2 weeks. It's not exactly news you share over the phone. You were coming back today and Mom and Dad were there, so I figured I'd get everyone up to speed at once. A wave of guilt washed over me. I was a pretty lousy husband. She must have gone to her appointments alone. Even if there was no love between us, I should at least be there for her. In the following weeks, I cut out all non-essential meetings and went straight home after work. Chloe's routine didn't change at all. Work, cook dinner, and then settle in with a pot of tea and a book. I'd lie on the bed, scrolling through my phone. We almost never fought. She had a great temper, but the main reason was that we barely communicated. She lived in her world, and I couldn't get in. I've seen too many marriages sour, where love turns to hate, where people cheat and change. I couldn't imagine what would happen if I married someone I was crazy in love with. When the passion faded, would the daily grind turn us into bitter enemies? Our situation was pretty good, all things considered. I'd married an eccentric who didn't care about jewelry, handbags, clothes, or makeup. She carried a beat-up, knockoff North Face backpack, wore $5 white t-shirts, and the same pair of Converse sneakers she'd worn on our first date, taking the bus to and from work every day. The only thing she spent money on were books and tea. Once, I couldn't stand the sight of that ratty backpack anymore. A woman in her 30s carrying a worn-out fake. I bought her a big Gucci tote, something that could hold all her miscellaneous stuff. She never used it once. I got angry and yelled at her, but she didn't get mad. She just looked at me and smiled that silly smile of hers. What really annoyed me was her habit of going downstairs to discuss the I Ching and ancient philosophies with the old men in our complex. The retirees in Chicago can really talk, and many are surprisingly well-read. They'd have these lively debates, their laughter echoing through the courtyard. I just couldn't understand why she loved hanging out with them so much and had so little to say to me. It made me a little jealous. Watching my wife laughing so freely in a circle of old men, I get more and more irritated until I just turn and go back upstairs. Deep down, I knew she didn't love me. I knew what real love looked like. And Chloe, with her personality, maybe wasn't capable of falling in love with a man in that way. It was as if she'd found a decent, stable life for herself and settled in, content to live in her own world. Now, with a child on the way, that probably just solidified her resolve. I felt conflicted. The reason I married Chloe was that I thought she was smart, endearingly naive, wouldn't cause me any trouble, and would be easy to manage. A year later, she hadn't changed a bit, but sometimes I'd get this inexplicable feeling of frustration. There was nothing I could point to, no fault of hers, but something felt wrong. The day Chloe was 3 months pregnant, I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone when that feeling of unease hit me again. I turned my head and asked her, "Do you love me?" Chloe looked up from her book, a little lost, her big, innocent eyes blinking at me. She thought for a moment, then asked, "What about you? Do you love me?" I was silent for a long time. She looked back down at her book. "It's enough that we both love the baby," she said. "I know we can do that. Right, Leo?" Yes, we could definitely do that. Neither of us came from a broken home. We grew up loved and happy. We could absolutely be good, responsible parents. But it felt like I wanted something more. What was it? I couldn't put my finger on it. I gave up and went back to my phone. The next morning, for the first time ever, I got up early to drive Chloe to work. She stared at me, baffled. "Are you okay? If you have something to do, just go. You don't need to drive me. The bus stop's right outside my building." "I know. I have a meeting nearby, so it's on the way." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I hadn't driven her once in the 2 years she'd worked there. Why the sudden change? Ignoring her, I went down to the garage to get the car, then picked her up and drove to the lab. Getting in was a major hassle. Security checks, ID verification, I even had to leave my driver's license at the gate. Finally, Chloe had to come down and vouch for me, telling the guard I was her husband before he let me through. I complained to her about the process. Chloe just patted my arm. "It can't be helped," she said soothingly. "We have a lot of classified projects here. You wouldn't have gotten in without me clearing you." "Then why'd you let me struggle for so long instead of coming down sooner?" I grumbled. "You might have to come back again. It's good for you to know the procedure," she said calmly. Inside her building, everyone from the janitors to the scientists greeted Chloe warmly, calling her Dr. Davis. She just nodded politely in return. I was floored. Chloe seemed to have some serious clout here. When we got her office, she put down her bag and looked at me, puzzled. "Why are you still here? Which office is your director in? What do you want? I don't think our lab has any projects that would fit with your company. Just tell me where it is." Chloe pouted and muttered under her breath, so secretive. Then she said, "Fine, I'll take you." She led me to the lab director's office and knocked. The director was wiping down his desk. When he saw Chloe, he immediately put down the rag. "Dr. Davis, please come in. And this is..." "Director, this is my husband." Chloe introduced me. The director shook my hand warmly. I didn't waste any time. "Director, it's nice to meet you. I'm here today to request leave for Chloe. She's 3 months pregnant, and I'd like her to start her maternity leave." Chloe tugged on my arm, trying to say something, but I ignored her. The director beamed. "That's wonderful news. Of course, Dr. Davis, you should be resting. I'll approve it immediately." He pulled out a leave form and filled it out himself, signing it on spot. As we left his office, form in hand, Chloe started complaining. "You could have at least given me a heads up. And I'm only 3 months along. It's against policy to take leave this early." I didn't care. The director had approved it. It was a done deal now. The truth was my mom had put me up to it. She was worried Chloe would trip or fall and something would happen. I figured she was right, so I decided it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission. With her on leave, Chloe fully embraced her freedom. Every morning after breakfast and our walk, she'd shoo me out the door and then dive headfirst into her world of old men, either playing chess or discussing the ancient books that fascinated her. The retirees all adored her quirky spirit. It was both hilarious and baffling. I never met anyone whose social life revolved around a group of senior citizens. One oddball. One afternoon about a month later, I finished work early and went home. I was trying to be home as much as possible. My mom said Chloe and the baby were the Miller family's crown jewels now, and my only job was to protect them. I had no choice but to obey. I wanted to be with Chloe anyway. She was genuinely interesting, even if we had nothing in common to talk about. But when I got home, she was gone. Not in the karaoke room, either. I strolled downstairs, assuming she was with her crew, but one of them, Old Man Hemlock, told me she'd gone fishing at the Lincoln Park Lagoon with 2 of the other guys. I almost lost it. Where she fell in. It was so dangerous. I drove straight there. Sure enough, I could see her from a distance, holding a fishing rod. I walked up to her, fuming. "Couldn't you have told me where you were going? This is dangerous. What if you fell in?" Chloe turned her head. What are you doing here? I didn't care that she was pregnant. I let her have it. She just looked at me with that silly smile, not saying a word. I scowled. This is serious. What are you smiling about? You made a huge mistake. She pouted, then bowed her head. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Great. That just completely deflated me. A fight would have been better. She wouldn't engage at all. What was I supposed to say? I couldn't get physical. My dad would kill me. Defeated, I shut up and sat with her by the water, fishing for the rest of the afternoon. I was so fidgety, she tried to get me to leave several times, but I just glared her into silence. And so, Chloe added a new hobby to her list, fishing. Every day she'd grab her bucket and rod, round up a few of the old guys, and they'd be gone for hours. By the time she was 6 months pregnant, her appetite exploded. She craved everything. I drove her all over Chicago, hunting down different foods to satisfy her cravings. My mom said it was normal for pregnant women to be like that, as long as she didn't overdo it. So, I resigned myself to being her culinary chauffeur. Then one day, while I was in the middle of a major project, I got a text from her on WhatsApp. Honey, I'm craving beignet. I'm going to New Orleans. What the hell? Just like that, I called her immediately. Honey, you want beignet? Just wait a couple of days. I'll take you this weekend. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, Chloe's voice came through. Honey, I'm already on the Amtrak. I nearly blew a gasket. You wait until you're on the train to tell me. This isn't asking. This is informing me. She sounded a little hurt. Last time, when I went fishing, you said I had to report my whereabouts to you. Fine. She had me there. I was completely out of moves. Just wait for me at the station in New Orleans. I'm booking a flight right now. And just like that, I bought a plane ticket and flew over 800 miles to New Orleans, all to take her to Café du Monde for some fried dough. Since we were already there, we decided to make a trip of it, spending a few days seeing the French Quarter and other sights. It was a rare vacation for us. If it hadn't been for this, she probably would have stayed in her own little corner of the world forever. Standing in Woldenberg Park by the Mississippi, I felt a strange sense of whiplash. That morning I'd been on a construction site, and by the afternoon, here I was. On a whim, I said, maybe we should do this every weekend. How about we go to Gettysburg next week? Chloe thought for a moment. Let's wait until the baby is older before we go to Pennsylvania. Why? I asked, confused. She explained patiently. I heard that if a child can recite the Gettysburg Address, they get free admission for the whole family. What if an adult can recite it? An adult only gets themselves in for free. I can recite it. Can you? That felt like a challenge. Annoyed, I shot her a look. I'm not worried about the price of ticket. After we got back to Chicago, Chloe got sick. It started with vomiting and diarrhea, then she developed a fever. My parents were so worried they came over every day. Chloe refused to take any medicine, insisting that pregnant women shouldn't and that she could just tough it out. On the third day, I had just gotten home from work when my mom slapped me across the face. Chloe, is this sick and you're still busy with your stupid company? Is money all you think about? I was stunned. It's just a fever. I can't just abandon my company, can I? Besides, you guys are here. My mom glared at me. Take her to the hospital now. I have a bad feeling about this. A fever that doesn't break after 3 days isn't normal. Her words sent a jolt of fear through me. I carefully lifted Chloe, carried her to the car, and drove her with my parents to the hospital. The doctor ordered a long list of tests. I wheeled Chloe from one to the next. It was midnight before I finally had a moment to breathe. My parents had stayed the whole time and were exhausted. I sent them home and sat by Chloe's bedside. She was sleeping peacefully, her long eyelashes fluttering occasionally. Her baby-faced cheeks were so cute. On impulse, I leaned in and gently kissed her cheek. We had been together for a year and a half, and this was the first time I had ever initiated a gesture of affection. Our physical intimacy had always felt more like a procreative duty. I held her hand and fell asleep, slumped over the side of the bed. When I woke up the next morning, my parents were already there, standing by the bed. Chloe was still asleep. After I washed up, a doctor stopped me in the hall. In his office, Dr. Evans looked grave, and my stomach twisted into knots. After a long pause, he spoke to my parents and me. The patient's situation is not optimistic. The CT scan shows a shadow in her brain, which we suspect is a tumor. We'll need to do a biopsy to determine if it's benign or malignant. My mind went blank. A loud ringing filled my ears. My mom went limp, slumping against my dad as a wail replaced the ringing. My dad held my mom with one arm and shoved me with the other. Get a grip. Listen to what the doctor is saying. I snapped back to reality, my eyes fixed on Dr. Evans. In that moment, he was my anchor, the only light I could see. He stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll wait for the biopsy results before we decide on a treatment plan. I nodded numbly. When we got back to the room, Chloe was awake. I composed myself, forcing a casual expression before I walked in. Seeing my parents, Chloe smiled. Mom, Dad, you're here. You don't have to come every day. It's too much trouble. My mom's tears, which had just stopped, started flowing again. My dad quickly led her out of the room. Chloe looked at me, confused, and I had no idea how to begin. When she gave me a questioning look, I steeled myself and told her exactly what Dr. Evans had said. She was the patient. She had a right to know. After I finished, Chloe thought for a long time, then smiled at me. Honey, thank you for being honest with me. The results aren't back yet, right? No need to be so pessimistic. We have to trust the doctors. Seeing her so calm, my own stomach was in turmoil. I couldn't tell if she was putting on a brave face or if she was genuinely that detached. Could anyone really be so serene in the face of death? I patted her head comfortingly. You're right. We'll trust the doctors. Chloe smiled and nodded vigorously. The wait for the results was agony. After the biopsy, I felt like I was going crazy. I couldn't sit, couldn't stand, just paced endlessly around her room. Seeing my restlessness, Chloe let out a small laugh. I looked at her, confused. Honey, she said softly, worrying now is just burning yourself out. Whether the news is good or bad, we won't know until tomorrow. Panicking won't change anything. We just have to wait. With that, she picked up the book from her nightstand and started reading. I truly admired her calm and clarity, but I couldn't emulate it. Even knowing the answer was a day away, I was consumed by anxiety. That day was the longest of my 33 years. Finally, the next day came. I rushed to the doctor's office. My parents wanted to come, but I told them to wait, afraid they couldn't handle the shock. Murphy's Law can be terrifyingly accurate. When the doctor said the word malignant, everything else he said faded into white noise. All the strength drained from my body, and I collapsed into a chair. It wasn't until he finished talking that I came to, looking up into his sympathetic eyes. Can it be treated? Is she going to die? We recommend palliative care. The tumor's location is pressed against major blood vessels and nerves, and it's already in the late stages. Surgery isn't an option, the doctor repeated patiently. How long does she have? I asked, my fist clenched. 3 to 6 months. It depends on the patient's state of mind and cooperation with treatment. I covered my face with my hands, my composure finally shattering. I had overestimated my own strength. After a long time, I slowly stood up. Doctor, can I ask you a favor? Can you help me keep this for my wife? The doctor shook his head. I wouldn't recommend that. There's no point, and you can't hide it. He had seen enough of life and death to know what patients needed. My heart sank in despair. This was hospice care. He wanted Chloe to go with her eyes open. Dr. Evans, please, I begged. Could you be the one to tell her? He nodded and left his office. I followed him to Chloe's room. My parents, waiting outside, rushed toward him, but I pulled them aside and told them I'd explain later. Watching Dr. Evans walk in her room felt like watching a judge deliver a death sentence. I couldn't understand it. Just a few days ago, we were fine on a spontaneous trip. Now our world was collapsing. When Dr. Evans came out, he began to explain Chloe's condition to my parents. I didn't listen. I told my dad to take care of my mom and hurried into the room. Chloe was reading. When she saw me, she put her book down and smiled. I stood nervously by her bed, at a loss for words. She took my hand. I'm sorry, honey, she said apologetically. The doctor said we have to terminate the pregnancy. They're going to induce labor this afternoon. I'm sorry I couldn't give you our baby. I shook my head frantically. It doesn't matter. As long as you're okay, that's all that matters. Chloe smiled faintly. I'll be fine. Go comfort Mom and Dad. And please, don't tell my sister or my parents yet. I nodded. At that point, I would have done anything she asked. She pulled her hand back and curled up under the covers. The rise and fall of the blanket told me she was crying silently. I didn't know if it was for our unborn child or for her own short, fleeting life. After a long time, the door opened and she peeked her head out. My dad came in, his eyes red, supporting my mom, who could barely walk. Chloe managed to smile for them. Mom, Dad, don't be sad for me. Everyone has to face this someday, sooner or later. I'm not sad. And thank you for loving me like a daughter. My mom stumbled toward the bed and collapsed onto it, sobbing. My poor child. Why is this happening? Seeing them both crying, I pulled my dad out of the room and into the emergency stairwell. I took out a pack of cigarettes, and we smoked in silence. There were a million things to say, but neither of us could speak. Finally, my dad broke the silence. What are you going to do? I crushed the cigarette under my shoe. What else can I do? We treat it. Every extra day is a day of hope. Maybe one day they'll find a cure for brain cancer. People always look for a non-existent escape when they're at their most desperate. I knew I was lying to myself, but I couldn't give up. My dad nodded firmly. We treat it. We'll sell everything if we have to. It won't come to that, I said, clapping him on the shoulder. I have money, and Chloe's job has good benefits. It'll be covered. We walked back to the room in silence. I don't know what Chloe said to my mom, but her tears had stopped. The two of them were chatting. My dad, normally a man of few words, sat by the bed and joined in. I guess they all felt that time was running out, and they needed to say everything they wanted to say. After lunch, they took Chloe for the induction. I waited outside the operating room. A nurse came out holding a small jar with a formed fetus inside and asked if I wanted it. I nodded grimly and took it. It was a boy. He never had the chance to be born into this world. If he had, I know Chloe and I would have been the best parents, raising him in a home full of love and peace. And now, in 6 months at most, Chloe would be gone too. I'd be all alone. I carefully stored the jar. When Chloe came out, she looked pale and weak. My mom immediately took over, caring for her day and night. It took a full week for Chloe to recover some of her strength. When she felt better, Chloe asked to be discharged. I refused without a second thought. I grabbed her hand, my voice pleading. Honey, please, let's try to treat it. There's still hope. You study the I Ching, right? Do a reading for yourself. You're always reading those old philosophy books. If Western medicine can't help, maybe there's another way. Chloe just smiled and shook her head. Honey, miracles aren't miracles if they happen just because we want them to. Let me go home. I want to live my last days with dignity and peace. She was right. I'd spent the last few days researching cancer treatments. For someone in her condition, without the option of surgery, the only path was palliative care, chemo, and radiation. The end result was always the same, a painful, emaciated decline. Her calm words convinced me. Dr. Evans signed the discharge papers. Back home, Chloe shut herself in the study. When she came out, she was holding a piece of paper. Bucket list: go home and see my parents and sister. Go back to the lab and see my colleagues. Go back to the university and see my professors and friends. Live the rest of my days peacefully and quietly. Looking at the simple list, I asked her, don't you want to travel? See the country? I'll go with you. Chloe just shook her head serenely. No, if I get next life, I'll travel then. I was never that interested in it in this life. No regrets. With that, she went in her karaoke room and poured her heart out. I made dinner and went to get her. As I listened to her singing a raw, emotional ballad, I suddenly felt that maybe, just maybe, she did have regrets. We went to her parents' home in that small Ohio town. Chloe calmly told her parents and sister about her diagnosis. The scene was as heart-wrenching as you can imagine. We stayed for 3 days. When we left, her family was sobbing uncontrollably. I stood by, wiping my own tears. This was a final goodbye. We went to her lab. When her colleagues heard the news, the entire place was filled with tears. As we were leaving, her director, a tough, 6-foot-tall man, pulled me aside, his eyes red. He gripped my hand tightly. Take care of her, he choked out. And when the time comes, let me know. I want to say goodbye. Our last stop was our university. Her advisor, my business partner, a refined and elegant old man, lost his composure for the first time in front of me. He had mentored Chloe for 11 years, from her undergraduate days through her Ph.D. The bond between them was unbreakable. After we had checked everything off her list, Chloe returned to her old life. Morning walks, chess with the old guys, fishing at the lagoon, reading in her rocking chair in the afternoon sun, sipping tea, and the occasional karaoke session. The only difference was that now I was always by her side. Whenever she tried to tell me to go to work, I would just imitate her, smiling and shaking my head, never arguing, just looking at her. My parents moved in with us to help take care of her. I suggested bringing her parents over too, but Chloe refused. She didn't want to disrupt their lives, she said. It would take them too long to adjust. She didn't finish the thought, but I knew what she meant. She didn't have that long. One evening, Chloe, who was reading, suddenly turned to me where I was pretending to read a book of my own. Can you ask me that question again? I knew immediately which one she meant. I put my book down and looked at her seriously. Chloe, do you love me? She smiled, the sweetest smile I had ever seen, and nodded forcefully. I do. I smiled back at her. I love you too, Chloe. So much. 3 months later, on a sunny afternoon, I was in the kitchen making her some soup when I heard a book fall to the floor in the bedroom. I wiped my hands and walked calmly to the doorway. The book was on the floor. Chloe's hand had fallen to her side. Her lips were curled into her usual, gentle smile. I walked over, picked up the book, and gently hugged her. It's time to go, kiddo. Be at peace. It was all so sudden, yet so expected. Chloe was right. When you're truly prepared, you can face anything with grace. I handled her affairs methodically. Her parents, her sister and brother-in-law, her colleagues, her advisor, and the old men from the park all came to say their final goodbyes. As she had requested, I didn't put any grand epitaph on her headstone. Instead, it read, "Life was good. I like to come back." It was the last thing she asked of me. I placed the urn with our son's ashes next to hers. I didn't want her to be lonely on her journey. Returning to the empty house, I started my life alone. In my quiet moments, I no longer reached for my phone. Instead, I'd pick up one of Chloe's books, brew the tea she liked, and lie in a rocking chair. I tried to live as she had, doing the things she did, hoping to find that place where she kept her soul, to find that simple, profound joy. But I couldn't do it. My mind wouldn't quiet down. Missing Chloe became the central focus of my life. We had only known each other for 2.5 years, but she had left an indelible mark on me. It wasn't a fiery passion or a heart-wrenching agony, but a quiet, steady presence that I couldn't let go of. I remembered something she'd said to me in her final days, her eyes full of apology. "Honey, I'm sorry. Death is not the tragedy of the dead, but of the living. I'm sorry to leave you alone." I didn't understand it then. I do now. I made sure my parents were settled, and then I began to travel, hoping to find an answer, a way to let go. My parents supported the idea, hoping it would help ease my grief. I went to a Zen center in California and hiked the Grand Canyon. By the time I reached my final destination, a monastery in upstate New York, I had given up hope of finding any answers. I met with the abbot and told him my story. He smiled gently. "You can't let go." I nodded. "Why not?" I sighed. "Because I can't forget." "Why must you forget? How can I let go if I don't forget?" I asked, confused. The master smiled. "When you love someone, if you cannot forget them, then don't. In every life, there is one cup of poison for which there is no antidote. When you reach the end of your life and look back, you will find that this poison has become a vintage wine, sweet enough to sip for a lifetime." His words hit me like a revelation. He was right. If I couldn't forget, why was I so obsessed with trying? If I forgot her, she would truly be gone from this world. A memory is kept alive by remembering. I thanked the master and returned home. As I looked around our house, I could see Chloe's presence everywhere. My heart filled with warmth. It was all proof that she had been here. And that was enough. Circumstance brought us together. We started by making do, and we ended by falling in love. I was the lucky one. Chloe was always lowering herself to meet me where I was. I was never worthy of her clean, noble soul. It was Chloe who taught me where to find a place for my soul to rest. It's right here, in every day that I miss her,